Good evening, everyone. I'm Miriam, and I'm a PhD student at the Department of Economics. And today I'm going to present you my research, that is the imperfect union, corruption exposure, and its consequences. Corruption scandals around the world are definitely not rare, and all of you can probably name at least one incident that was widely covered in the news, either in the past or in recent years. Two examples from these headlines you see: the 2015 FIFA corruption scandal, or the big corruption scandal that hit Italian politics in the beginning of the 1990s. Intuitively, exposing corruption that allows us to eliminate corruption possibly may give us a positive outcome, better institutions. How? Institutions without corruption are more efficient and have higher equity. They are more equitable and more efficient. However, can exposing corruption have negative unintended consequences? Indeed, exposing corruption may not only disrupt the reputation of one corrupt individual within an institution, but also damage the reputation of the whole institution. Additionally, these corruption scandals may have an impact even on other institutions that were honest and transparent even before the scandal. Imagine that, for example, a politician is exposed as corrupt, and then citizens may think that all politicians, all political parties are corrupt as well. And then citizens may decide not to go to vote because they think everyone is corrupt anyway. And this collateral damage, or these negative spillovers, as economists call them, may hinder the ability of institutions, of productive and good institutions, to actually fulfill their function or their purpose, a purpose that corruption exposure or investigations against corruption are actually meant to preserve or restore. So I'm studying this question in the context of labor unions in the United States. Why labor unions? Labor unions can be a very important actor both in the economy for efficiency and equality, and also in the political arena, representing workers' demands in public policy. But let me tell you about unions in the US. This graph is taken from a recent paper that shows how unions in the US decreased inequality in income inequality around the 1940s. However, their decline from the end of the 1950s is very related to an increase in inequality, the green line you see here. But my question then is, what caused this decline? I will study an extensive and highly publicized investigation against corruption in US unions that happened at the end of the 1950s. This corruption exposure was highly publicized and all over the news. The US Senate Investigative Committee, the McClellan Committee, investigated corruption and criminal infiltration in US unions. This exposure was all over the news. The hearings were showed on TV, broadcast on TV, and also were all over the newspapers as well. Importantly, the polls, the surveys among the population show that between January and September 1957, the approval rate of labor unions actually fell by 10 percentage points because of this investigation, from 75% to 65%. Or alternatively, as the labor historian Nelson Lichtenstein wrote, these hearings, this investigation had a devastating impact on the moral standing of the entire trade union world. So I'm the first to study this event and how this impacted this decline in labor unions in the US. So I first asked myself, did the news coverage actually increase in the data, since that's my job in measuring historical things. So I see that counties with higher union presence before the committee, we actually see an increase in newspaper coverage of corruption in labor unions during the investigation period. Additionally, as a second step, I look at the unintended consequences of exposing corruption. First of all, I find that there is a negative reputation shock on unions because congressmen, politicians elected in the Congress, tend to speak more negatively of labor unions in their speeches after the investigation. More importantly, plausibly, union membership fell as a consequence of the investigation and its exposure in the media. Last but not least, this fall in union membership also translated in a decrease in the political mobilization because labor unions were one of the institutions that were pushing people to go and vote in elections, and particularly so in presidential elections. I find that counties that were particularly hit by the scandal but see a decrease in turnout in presidential elections from 1964 onwards. Importantly, these effects are not driven by places where investigated locals or investigated unions were located, suggesting that the negative reputation shock actually hit all unions in the US and not only the investigated ones, not only the corrupt ones. So let me conclude with saying, in a nutshell, I show you that exposing corruption may have negative unintended consequences on institutions. And to avoid throwing out the baby with the bath water, as Schroeder suggests here, we should be very careful when corruption is exposed, and policymakers and media should be careful in not avoiding generalizations and avoiding making a public spectacle of corruption incidences. Thanks. Thank you very much.